Have you ever been deep into a really long article, maybe a fascinating book, and suddenly you catch yourself scrolling aimlessly or your mind just drifts?
Oh, yeah.
You're
Yep. Well,
thinking about your notifications maybe, or what you need to pick up from the grocery store later. It's like your brain is actually, well, craving that quick hit, that fresh tab, that little burst of new information.
it really is. It's more than just a fleeting feeling for a lot of us, isn't it? That constant pull, the almost magnetic urge to just jump from one thing to the next, switch context all the time.
Exactly. And that pervasive experience is precisely what we're plunging into today.
Hmm.
We're going to dive deep into Nicholas Carr's really, really thought-provoking book, The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains.
Hmm.
And this isn't just about the content we consume online, right? It's about how the act of being online, the very process, might be fundamentally changing our minds, how we process information, how we focus, maybe even how we learn.
Indeed. Our mission for this deep dive, really, is to unpack Carr's central arguments. And he roots them in some absolutely fascinating historical context, showing how past technologies, similarly reshaped how people thought.
Right.
Then we'll get into the scientific evidence he presents, specifically around this idea of brain rewiring and neuroplasticity.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll discuss what all of this means for our attention spans, our learning capabilities, maybe even our sense of self.
And crucially, we'll also look at some of the counter-arguments. Are these changes just different, a kind of new evolution of human thought? Or is there something vital, something really essential that we might be accidentally losing in this constant digital flood?
Mm-hmm.
All our insights today come directly from extensive excerpts from Carr's book, so we can go straight to the source, pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge to help you get truly well-informed on this whole topic. Okay, let's get into it.
So what's really foundational here, I think, is that Carr doesn't just jump straight to the internet. He starts with this brilliant and, frankly, kind of unsettling idea from Marshall McLuhan, the media theorist, way back in 1964.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. McLuhan's core concept from understanding media was pretty radical back then, and it feels incredibly relevant now. The medium itself, not just its content, is what fundamentally changes us.
Right. And he famously pushed back against what he called the numb stance of the technological idiot, which basically means, dismissing the profound impact of a technology by just saying, oh, it's how we use it that matters.
Exactly. He was directly criticizing that instrumentalist view, which you still hear all the time. David Sarnoff, the guy who pioneered radio and TV, famously said something like, the products of modern science aren't good or bad. It's how they're used that determines their value.
Uh-huh. Sounds reasonable on the surface.
Yeah, but McLuhan just scoffed at that. He called it self-serving and the voice of current somnambulism, like sleepwalking. He argued, every new medium changes us, whether we notice it or not.
The medium is the message.
That's the one. To McLuhan, the content, the actual stuff we watch or read, is just the juicy piece of meat carried by the burglar to distract the watchdog of the mind.
That's a great analogy.
Isn't it? We get so caught up in the news, the latest viral video, the show, the what, that we completely miss the profound effects of the how. The technology itself just kind of vanishes behind the endless stream of information it delivers.
And if McLuhan thought the media of his time, like TV and radio, were a distracting feast, he couldn't possibly have imagined the sheer, unprecedented all-you-can-eat buffet the internet serves up.
Oh, absolutely. It's just one course after another, each one juicier, more immediate, more compelling. And now with smartphones, it's a movable feast, isn't it? Available anytime, anywhere, you're never really off.
Yeah, never offline.
And that incredible convenience, as Carr points out, it can really bulldoze our doubts. Even those of us who might be a bit wary of the net's influence, well, we often find our concerns just overridden by how useful and enjoyable it is.
Sure, we like to think we're in control.
We do. We think that technology is just a tool we pick up and put down whenever we want. But McLuhan's insight, and what Carr explores, suggests it's much more subtle, a deeply transformative process happening. We're not just using the internet. In a way, it's using us, reshaping us.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting and honestly quite relatable for me anyway. Carr kicks off his book with this really personal anecdote that almost felt like he was, reading my mind. He describes this creeping serpent of doubt that slithered into his info paradise, as he calls it, around 2007. And this guy, he was a lit major, right? Someone who used to be a voracious book reader.
Right.
And suddenly he found himself just struggling to stay focused on long pieces of writing. His brain, he realized, wasn't just drifting. It felt hungry. It was demanding to be fed the way the net fed at it, those quick hits, the constant novelty, that instant gratification. He actually said he missed his old brain. Have you ever felt that subtle shift?
Absolutely, yes. It's a really pervasive feeling, and Carr shows it's definitely not just him. He brings in other voices, like Scott Karp, a blogger who pretty famously confessed he just stopped reading books altogether.
Wow.
And his question really hits home. What if I do all my reading on the web, not so much because the way I read has changed, but because the way I think has changed? That's a chilling thought, isn't it? That it's not just a habit change, but something much deeper, a fundamental alteration in cognition.
Yeah, it really is, and it goes further. Bruce Friedman, a pathologist and blogger, described his thinking taking on this staccato quality. He admitted, I can't read War and Peace anymore. I've lost the ability to do that. Even a blog post of more than 3 or 4 paragraphs is too much to absorb. I skim it. Skimming. And Philip Davis, who was a doctoral student, even recalled telling a friend off for reading web pages. He said, you're not supposed to read web pages, just click on the hypertexted words. Now he admits he skims pretty much everything and has very little patience for long, drawn-out, nuanced arguments.
What's really striking about those examples, Karp, Friedman, Davis, as Karp points out, is how kind of sanguine, almost optimistic they seemed about losing their deep reading ability.
Right. They didn't seem that bothered.
No. They sort of chalked it up to the benefits, like quick information access, feeling more creative through what Karp called a networked thinking process. Davis even thought the internet may have made me a less patient reader, but it has made me smarter, more connections, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you hear that a lot, especially maybe from younger people, digital natives.
Yeah.
But then you hear observations like the Duke professor Catherine Hales, who confessed, I can't get my students to read whole books anymore. And these are literature students we're talking about. So what does this all mean? Carr suggests we've hit this critical point, transitioning between 2 really different ways of thinking. The calm, focused, undistracted, linear mind, the one cultivated for centuries by deep reading, is being pushed aside by a new kind of mind that wants and needs to take in and dull out information in short, disjointed, often overlapping bursts. The faster, the better.
And this brings us neatly to the underlying science, the basis for these potentially profound changes. Neuroplasticity.
Okay.
For a long, long time, the dominant view was that the adult brain was basically hardwired, like a machine or a computer chip, fixed parts for fixed functions. But even way back late 19th century, Sigmund Freud had this, prescient idea, though it was outside the mainstream then. He surmised the brain was made of separate cells, and the gaps between them, what we now call synapses, were key in shaping memories and thoughts.
So these neurons, the brain cells, they talk to each other across those gaps, the synapses, using chemicals, neurotransmitters.
Exactly. Our thoughts, memories, emotions, they all emerge from these intricate electrochemical conversations. But the huge breakthrough was realizing this system isn't static. The brain isn't fixed in its form after childhood.
It can change.
It can change. That shift from the hardwired metaphor to understanding brain plasticity was just monumental. Back in 1950, the British biologist J.Z. Young, in some BBC lectures, argued the brain structure might actually be in constant flux. He proposed that the cells of our brains literally develop and grow bigger with use, and atrophy or waste away with disuse.
Wow, so use it or lose it literally applies to brain cells.
Pretty much. That was his revolutionary idea that every action leaves some permanent print upon the nervous tissue.
And then came the experiments, right? The proof.
Yes, the experimental proof is just incredible. Michael Merzenek's monkey experiments in 1968 were absolutely groundbreaking. He carefully severed sensory nerves in monkeys' hands and then watched how their brain maps literally reorganized themselves as the nerves healed, sometimes in slightly different configurations. New neural pathways actually wove themselves to adapt.
So the brain wasn't just repairing itself, it was actively rewiring.
Precisely. And this wasn't just happening in the somatosensory cortex, the touch area. It turned out to be universal. Virtually all of our neural circuits, Carr writes, are subject to this kind of change.
Okay, give me another example.
A really compelling one is with blind individuals. Their visual cortex, the part of the brain that normally processes sight, doesn't just go dark. It gets quickly taken over by circuits for hearing or touch. So for instance, if someone learns Braille, their visual cortex can actually get redeployed to help process that touch information.
That's genuinely astonishing. So this flexibility, this malleability, it isn't just for recovery from injury. It's the normal, ongoing state of our nervous system through our whole lives. Our brains are always in flux.
That's exactly it. As Alvaro Pasqualeone, a top neurology researcher at Harvard, puts it, Plasticity is the normal, ongoing state of the nervous system throughout the lifespan. Our brains are constantly adapting, moment by moment, even to tiny shifts in our circumstances or behavior.
Right.
It's summed up by that famous Hebb's rule. Cells that fire together wire together. It means the brain's genius isn't that it's fixed, but that it's incredibly flexible. It's designed to change, to adapt based on how we use it.
And this neuroplasticity then provides the crucial link for understanding how these intellectual technologies like the internet can influence us so deeply, right down to a biological level.
Yes. Their use consistently strengthened some neural circuits and weakened others, not just over generations, but within a single lifetime, sometimes even over just weeks or days of practice.
So it connects what we're feeling now back through history. Genetic evolution is super slow, obviously, but how humans think and act has changed profoundly over millennia.
Exactly. Neuroplasticity shows us how our habits of thought, the ones passed down through education, culture, and media, can literally modify our brain structures. They reshape the very landscape of our minds.
Okay, so if we connect this bigger picture, it's clear that the tools we use, especially the ones for handling information, are intellectual technologies. They have this really profound, lasting power over how and what we think.
Yeah, they're not just passive objects, they kind of embody an intellectual ethic, a specific way of approaching knowledge. And this isn't new. Carr makes a strong case looking back.
What's truly fascinating here is exploring how these past technologies also reshaped minds, setting precedents for what we might be experiencing now with the internet. You might think, what do ancient maps have to do with my smartphone? But let's look at them.
Okay, maps.
From just crude scribbles to really precise surveys, map-making kind of mirrors individual cognitive development, like Jean Piaget described. We go from drawing what we literally see right in front of us to drawing what we know abstractly exists.
And as Vincent Verga, an expert on maps, pointed out, our individual growth in map-making skills from, like, a kid's drawing to complex calculations remarkably mirrors the intellectual maturation of humanity itself. Maps didn't just show space. They transformed our whole concept of space.
They weren't just for storage.
No, far from it. Arthur Robinson, a cartographic historian, explained that maps embody a particular mode of seeing and thinking. They spread a distinctive way of perceiving and making sense of the world. By letting us use a reduced substitute space for that of reality, maps actually advanced the evolution of abstract thinking across society. It basically gave us a new, more abstract kind of mind.
So if maps changed space, the mechanical clock did the same thing for time.
Right. For most of history, time was experienced as this continuous cyclical flow, dominated by agrarian rhythms, free of haste, careless of exactitude, as the historian Jacques Le Goff nicely put it. People used the sun, moon, stars, the seasons. It's actually hard to imagine a world without minutes and seconds, isn't it?
It really is. Total dependence now.
But that started to change profoundly with Christian monks, especially the Benedictines. Their lives revolved around incredibly precise prayer schedules. That deep spiritual need for exact timing spurred the development of the first mechanical clocks.
Ah, interesting. Monks needed clocks.
They did, and these clocks redefined time. They chopped up that continuous flow into discrete, measurable segments, units of equal duration. And this, in turn, started influencing how people thought, stressing methodical mental work of division and measurement.
Lewis Mumford, in his big book, Technics and Civilization, argued the clock, helped create the belief in an independent world of mathematically measurable sequences. He thought it brought forth the scientific mind and the scientific man.
So it's not just about telling time. It's a fundamental shift in perceiving reality, segmenting it. And yeah, it definitely laid groundwork for valuing efficiency and measurable units, things the internet pushes to extremes.
Okay, moving from maps and clocks to something even more fundamental, maybe. Writing technologies. These had an enormous impact.
Huge. Early forms like Sumerian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphs, they were complex, sure, but they developed new neural circuits for seeing, for making sense, for hearing language represented visually, for decision-making, as Marianne Wolf describes in her work. But for writing to become widespread, it really had to simplify.
Right, it needed to be easier to learn and use, which eventually led to the phonetic alphabet.
Exactly. Now, McLuhan, always the provocateur, he had this idea that literacy maybe caused a detachment from the feelings, made us less sensuously involved than oral cultures. But Walter Ong, in Orality and Literacy, gives a really powerful counterargument. He argues literacy is absolutely necessary for the development not only of science, but also of history, philosophy, explicative understanding of literature, and of any art. He basically concluded, writing heightens consciousness.
So what was the big cognitive leap with writing becoming widespread?
This is where Carr talks about the deepening page. The true revolution in reading wasn't just writing existing, but the formalization of written language. John Sanger explains that the lack of word separation and inconsistent word order in ancient texts put this huge extra cognitive burden on readers.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like solving a puzzle just to read.
Exactly. Reading was slow, halting, mentally really strenuous. Try reading a whole page of text with no spaces between words. It's tough.
So when did that change?
It wasn't until well after the Roman Empire collapsed, apparently, that scribes, especially in Ireland and England, started consistently dividing sentences into individual words, separated by spaces. Punctuation also became common. This seemingly simple change, it dramatically alleviated that cognitive strain.
Made reading faster, easier.
Much faster, much easier, and crucially, it allowed for silent reading and with greater comprehension. Marianne Wolf details how proficient readers develop specialized brain regions just for rapidly deciphering text. This frees up enormous mental resources for the interpretation of meaning.
Ah, so that's what enables deep reading.
Precisely. It transforms what was a demanding decoding exercise into something almost automatic. It lets the mind dive deeper into the meaning, the nuances, the connections, rather than just struggling with the symbols themselves.
And it also demanded this. Well, Carr calls it an unnatural process of thought, the sustained, unbroken attention to a single static thing, a page.
Right. T.S. Eliot's The Still Point of the Turning World comes to mind. We literally had to train our brains to ignore everything else, to resist that instinctive distractedness, which is actually our more natural state. It was a real cognitive discipline.
And this sustained, quiet reading led to a unique mental state.
Seems so. Isaac of Syria, a medieval bishop, described entering this meditative state when reading silently, a filling or replenishing of the mind. Readers disengage from the outside world to engage more deeply with an inward flow of words, ideas, emotions. This cultivated what Carr terms the literary mind, a brain profoundly shaped by this quiet, contemplative, linear act of reading.
And this liberation, it also spread to writers, right?
Absolutely. With word spaces, authors could finally compose privately, in silence, rather than dictating everything to a scribe. This led to more personal, more adventurous, maybe even more heretical works. They could see their writing as a whole, refine arguments, play with structure, individualism, self-awareness. They strengthened. Quiet, solitary research became vital for intellectual work. It was a huge shift.
And then the printing press, the real game changer.
The absolute game changer. Gutenberg's combination of movable type, a refined press, oil-based ink, it mechanized book production. Books went from being these expensive, scarce, hand-copied things to being relatively affordable and plentiful. Francis Bacon saw its influence as massive, equal to gunpowder and the compass.
And this created that virtuous cycle you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. More books available fuel the desire for literacy, which in turn created more demand for books. The industry just exploded. Within 50 years of Gutenberg's press, Carr notes, as many books were produced as scribes had produced in the entire preceding 1,000 years.
That's just kind of crazy acceleration.
It really is. Now, of course, it wasn't all high-minded philosophy and literature. There was a flood of tawdry novels, quack theories, gutter journalism, propaganda, and, of course, reams of pornography.
Huh. Sounds familiar.
Doesn't it? Priests and politicians back then were genuinely worried if more mischief than advantage came from printing. Déjà vu.
But despite the less noble content, the printing press fundamentally democratized that literary mind, didn't it?
It did. It allowed ordinary people to compare ideas, to look beyond just religious teachings. It fueled the Reformation, political upheaval, and the rise of the scientific method because, as J.Z. Young noted, it let people look more directly at each other's observations, increasing accuracy and knowledge sharing. The literary mind, once stuck in cloisters and universities, had become the general mind. The world was remade.
Okay, let's fast forward now to our present moment. If we connect all that rich history to the internet, we see this new phase of technological transformation unfolding, maybe the most profound one yet.
Possibly. Alan Turing's theoretical universal machine from 1936, the conceptual blueprint for modern computers, has finally been realized, Carr argues, in our universal medium, the internet.
That's a really key point, because pretty much all traditional media, words, numbers, sounds, images, they can all be translated into digital code, so the internet is just subsuming everything.
It really is. It's our typewriter, our printing press, our map, our clock, calculator, telephone, post office, library, radio, TV. It's becoming everything. It's even taking over the functions of other computers, right? With software running in the cloud. It's the ultimate all-in-one device.
Which leads us to what Carr calls the Internet's new intellectual ethic. And he makes this, frankly, quite chilling connection to Frederick Winslow Taylor's scientific management.
Taylorism, right. Early 20th century, Taylor wanted the one best method for everything in factories. Maximizing efficiency, basically turning workers into cogs, following precise instructions. He believed there was one optimal way.
And Google, Carr argues, kind of embodies this Taylorist ethic, but for the mind. Their mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. They have this almost, messianic faith in their algorithms to find the one best way.
But here's the crucial bit. Google's business model, their profits, are tied directly to the velocity of people's information intake. The more clicks, the more pages we view, the more ads they can show us. As Carr bluntly puts it, Google is fundamentally in the business of distraction. Efficiency for the system, maybe, but what about the depth of thought for us?
This feeds directly into what many people are experiencing as a kind of widespread attention crisis online. The internet is incredibly bidirectional. We send stuff out just as much as we take it in. It's become a personal broadcasting medium, blogs, videos, social networks. Everyone's a publisher, everyone's a receiver.
And the sheer volume of use is just staggering. By 2009, North American adults were already spending 12 hours online a week, young adults over 19 hours. Texting alone for American teens back then, over 2,200 texts a month. This constant connection, as Dana Boyd from Microsoft observed, means we never really have to disconnect.
It hits home because it just describes daily life for so many now.
Totally. And what's really paradoxical, though, is that all this net use doesn't seem to decrease TV viewing. It actually expands our total screen time. Most Americans, regardless of age, now spend at least 8.5 hours a day staring at a screen, often juggling multiple devices at once.
It's not replacing old media, it's just piling on top, increasing the cognitive load.
Exactly. And what is decreasing sharply is print, reading newspapers, magazines, and especially books. Young adults were reading print for only about 49 minutes a week back in 2008, which was a huge drop in just 4 years. The net, Carr argues, seizes our attention only to scatter it, creating this seductive blur.
That constant stream of inputs, the clicks, scrolls, pop-ups, notifications, likes, emails, It creates this state of perpetual stimulation.
And Michael Hassauer noted that for young people especially, there's this terrific anxiety about being out of the loop, FOMO, fear of missing out, that keeps them constantly tethered, constantly checking. It creates that state. T.S. Eliot describes so well, being distracted from distraction by distraction. And Carr argues this short-circuits both conscious and unconscious thought, preventing our minds from thinking either deeply or creatively.
And a huge part of that scattered feeling is multitasking, right? The Windows interface from Xerox PARC back in the 70s made it super easy, and now it's just how we compute.
It is. But brain scientists talk about switching costs. Every single time we shift our attention, even quickly, our brain has to reorient itself. That taxes mental resources, it hinders deeper thinking, and crucially, it increases errors.
We often pride ourselves on multitasking, though, don't we? Like it's a skill.
We do, but the science suggests maybe not so efficient after all. Russell Poldrack's study showed people could make predictions okay while multitasking, but afterwards they had a much harder time drawing conclusions about what they'd learned. The insight, the deeper understanding just wasn't forming. And on the net, we're not just juggling two tasks, we're often juggling several mental streams simultaneously. That just amplifies these switching costs massively, leading to this kind of constant cognitive fatigue.
So given all that bombardment and task switching, it's really no surprise that shallow skimming seems to be the new default online. Okay, now we're really getting to the core of the shallows.
Right. Jacob Nielsen's eye-tracking studies from 2006 were fascinating. They showed people read online text in this characteristic F pattern. They scan horizontally across the top few lines, then maybe halfway across a few more, then just vertically down the left side looking for keywords.
So not really reading line by line.
Not at all. They spend only about 4.4 seconds more per 100 words than if they were just purely scanning. It's not reading, it's hunting for information snippets.
And other data backs this up.
Yeah, ClickTail data showed people spend, on average, only maybe 19 to 27 seconds on a web page before clicking away. There's really no such thing as leisurely browsing anymore. We're always in a rush, always looking for the next link, the next hit.
Even academic researchers are doing this.
Apparently so. A University College London study found academics power browsing horizontally, hopping quickly from one source to another, rarely returning. The study concluded they essentially go online to avoid reading in the traditional sense. That's pretty stark for scholars.
Wow, avoid reading.
And Ziminglus's earlier survey back in 2003 found similar trends among educated professionals. 85% reading more electronic documents, yes, but 81% doing more browsing and scanning, 82% more nonlinear reading. But critically, only 27% reported doing more in-depth reading, while almost half said it was declining.
So skimming, which used to be a tool, a means to an end,
is becoming our dominant mode of reading. Carr says we're becoming hunters and gatherers in the electronic data forest, constantly searching for snippets, rarely settling down to actually digest anything fully.
Okay, this all raises the big question then. What are the actual cognitive trade-offs here? If our brains are genuinely rewiring, like the science suggests, what are we gaining? And maybe more importantly, what are we losing as we spend more and more time in this shallow skimming mode? Is this rewiring good, bad, or just different?
The scientific evidence, as Carr lays it out, is getting clearer. That 2008 study by Gary Small and his colleagues is really key here. They compared experienced web surfers and novices using Google, scanning their brains.
And what did they find?
They found the experienced Googlers showed much broader brain activity, especially in a region called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex that's linked to decision-making, problem-solving. The novices didn't show that same activity. It suggests, that web searching is a complex mental task.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's the really astonishing part, right? The implication.
This is the kicker. After just 5 hours, only 5 one-hour sessions of practicing internet searching, the novices' brain scans started looking just like the veterans. Their brains had rapidly rewired their brains to match.
Wow, 5 hours.
5 hours. It strongly suggests that while web surfing definitely exercises the brain in certain ways, maybe like doing crosswords keeps older minds active, the constant mental coordination and decision-making involved, like evaluating links, processing all the visual stimuli, actively distracts from deeply interpreting the text itself. It hinders comprehension and retention.
So the activity itself gets in the way of understanding.
That seems to be the implication. Marianne Wolf puts it very succinctly. She says, we sacrifice the facility that makes deep reading possible. We revert to being mere decoders of information.
And this difficulty in comprehension is tied to how our memory works.
Exactly. It's intrinsically linked. John Sweller, an educational psychologist, explains this really well. Our brains have short-term or working memory. Think of it like a mental scratch pad, but with very limited capacity. Maybe only hold a few pieces of information at once.
Right.
And then we have long-term memory, which stores everything we've learned as complex concepts or schemas. That's a real seat of understanding, of knowledge. But getting information from that tiny working memory scratch pad into the vast filing system of long-term memory is slow. Sweller likens it to filling a bathtub with a thimble.
Okay, I like that analogy, filling a bathtub with a thimble.
It works, right? And when we read a book, it's like a steady drip into the thimble. We can process it, make connections, transfer it slowly, building those rich associations that create robust schemas, deep understanding.
The net.
The net is like having many information faucets all going full blast. Our little mental thimble just overflows constantly. We're overloaded. And the little bit we do manage to transfer to long-term memory is often just a jumble of drops from different faucets, fragmented, disconnected, shallow.
But there's that argument, you hear it sometimes, that the web is like an outboard brain. Clive Thompson, David Brooks have suggested this. Offloading memory to silicon frees our own gray matter for more Germanly human tasks like brainstorming and daydreaming.
The idea is we just need to remember where to find the information, not the information itself. It sounds appealing, efficient.
It does sound like progress, doesn't it? Less mental clutter. But Carr argues this is a fundamental fallacy, and he backs it up with the neuroscience. Eric Kandel's Nobel Prize-winning research on sea slugs showed that forming long-term memories isn't just about storing data. It requires actual physical, anatomical changes in the brain, the growth of new synaptic terminals.
So memory isn't just software, it's hardware changes.
Exactly. The number of synapses in the brain is not fixed. It changes with learning. Biological memory has this organic richness. It's in a perpetual state of renewal. It's not like distinct static bits of data on a hard drive.
Furthermore, that whole idea of freeing up space in our brains, it's just biologically wrong. Nelson Cowan, an expert on memory, states flatly that long-term memory expands and contracts with almost unlimited elasticity. The normal human brain never reaches a point at which experiences can no longer be committed to memory. The brain cannot be full.
So storing more doesn't fill it up.
No, quite the opposite. The more we store, the more connections we have, the easier it becomes to learn new things because we have more schemas to attach new information to. New knowledge actually makes our minds sharper, more expansive.
Okay, so that calculator analogy people use, we don't do long division in our heads anymore. That doesn't really hold up for the internet.
Carr argues it doesn't. A calculator aids working memory, helping us perform a calculation to then potentially transfer the concept or result to long-term memory. The web, conversely, puts more strain on our already limited working memory because of the constant flood of information and required navigation choices. This actively obstructs the consolidation of information into long-term memory and the development of those deep schemas.
So the web might actually be a technology of forgetfulness.
That's his provocative conclusion. The more we use the web in this scattered way, the more we train our brain to be distracted, to process information very quickly, yes, very efficiently on the surface, but without sustained attention, without deep consolidation. This helps explain why many find it hard to concentrate even when they're offline. Our brains become better at forgetting and worse at truly remembering, understanding, and connecting ideas.
Okay, so this raises that recurring question. Are we getting smarter or just different? What about the Flynn effect, those rising IQ scores over the last century? People often point to that and say, see, we're still getting smarter despite technology.
Right, the Flynn effect is real. IQ scores have gone up. But James Flynn himself, the guy who discovered it, concluded that these gains mostly reflect a transformation in how we approach intelligence, not necessarily a straight increase in general intelligence. We've gotten much better at applying intelligence to new kinds of problems, more abstract visual ones. We're wearing scientific spectacles, as he put it.
So better at certain types of thinking, maybe?
Exactly. And Patricia Greenfield's review of studies supports this. She found net use leads to widespread and sophisticated development of visual spatial skills, navigating complex environments, processing visual information quickly. But often this comes at the expense of deep processing, things like mindful knowledge acquisition, inductive analysis, critical thinking, imagination, reflection. It's a trade-off.
So Carr's conclusion is, the net is making us smarter. In other words, only if we define intelligence by the net's own standards. Speed over depth.
Pretty much. Deep contemplative thought seems to be getting sacrificed for rapid-fire information processing. Jordan Grafman from the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke noted that constant attention shifting online might make our brains quick at multitasking, but it hampers our ability to think deeply and creatively. The more you multitask, the less deliberative you become, the less able to think and reason out a problem.
Less deliberative. And David Meyer, another expert on multitasking, adds, we just become skillful at a superficial level.
Yeah, masters of skimming. It reminds me of the Roman philosopher Seneca, who said something incredibly relevant 2,000 years ago. To be everywhere is to be nowhere.
Wow. Okay, that resonates. This also brings us back to McLuhan's idea that our tools don't just amplify a part of us, they also kind of paradoxically numb it. That when we extend ourselves with technology, we often distance ourselves from that natural function. That's a really quite a chilling idea when you think about it.
It is, and we can see it historically. The power loom amplified textile production, sure, but weavers lost some of that intricate manual dexterity. Mechanical harrows boosted farming efficiency, but farmers maybe lost some of their intuitive feel for the soil. With intellectual technologies, Carr argues, this numbing effect applies to the most intimate, the most human of our natural capacities, those for reason, perception, memory, emotion.
No.
The mechanical clock, while giving us precision, also disassociated time from human events, making us maybe more scientific, but a bit more mechanical.
And the map, even the map had a numbing effect.
Potentially. While it massively amplified our ability to navigate vast distances, our innate, evolved ability to read and understand a landscape directly might have weakened. Eleanor Maguire, the researcher who famously studied the brains of London taxi drivers.
Right, with the huge hippocampi from learning the knowledge.
Exactly. She worried that widespread GPS use could actually diminish those hippocampal areas. If you don't need the complex mental map anymore because the device does it for you, the brain region might shrink. It could make our brains, as she put it, less interesting.
So we gain convenience but lose complexity within ourselves.
That's the trade-off. McLuhan understood some alienation is inevitable with technology. We build houses to be alienated from rain, sewers from filth. But the key, Carr stresses, is that honest appraisal of what's lost alongside what's gained. We need to be aware so we don't accidentally numb some essential part of ourselves just for convenience.
This connects directly to the automation of cognition we see everywhere now. That study by Christoph van Nimwegen on computer-aided learning is really eye-opening here.
Yeah, tell us about that one.
He found that software designed to be really helpful, offering explicit guidance, actually led to less mental engagement and ultimately less learning and retention from the users. The more people depended on the helpful software, the less they learned and remembered.
So the software doing the thinking meant the user didn't have to.
Exactly. He concluded that as we externalize problem solving to computers, we diminish our brain's own ability to build stable knowledge structures, those schemas we talked about. His takeaway was brutal. The brighter the software, the dimmer the user.
Ouch. That's a stark warning. And search engines like Google, with its query suggestions, they automate complex cognitive processes, don't they?
They do. While it makes searching more convenient and efficient, it also means we're often following scripts written by others, Carr says. This can lead to kind of mindless rituals and a loss of personal initiative, creativity, and whim. We just follow the suggested path.
And there was another study by James Evans looking at academic articles.
Yes, that was fascinating too. He found that as scholarly journals moved online, making searching incredibly easy, researchers paradoxically started citing fewer unique articles than before. And despite the ease of finding older stuff, they cited more recent articles with increasing frequency.
So easy access led to narrower reading.
That was his conclusion. It led to a narrowing of science and scholarship because researchers tended to follow the electronically beaten path, the prevailing opinion, and bypass potentially relevant but marginally related articles they might have stumbled upon browsing physical journals. The easy way, Evans noted, isn't always the best way for fostering broad understanding.
It really reinforces that idea. We tend to stick to what's most easily available, the path of least resistance, even if it limits our intellectual scope. And finally, Carr connects this constant stimulation, this pressure for speed, to potentially eroding our capacity for empathy and contemplation. Antonio Damasio, the director of USC's Brain and Creativity Institute, explains that deep thinking, empathy, compassion, these are inherently slow processes neurologically. While reacting to someone's physical pain is quick, empathizing with their psychological suffering, understanding their perspective, that unfolds much more slowly. It requires calm, attentive, sustained focus.
And the net's environment works against that.
Carr argues it does. The constant barrage of stimuli, the ingrained habit of quick shifts in focus, hinders the development and exercise of that calm, attentive mind needed for these deeper, nobler instincts.
Okay, so looking ahead. What's the prognosis? Some argue, look, technological progress doesn't reverse. Our human software will just evolve. We'll become more agile consumers of data, gain new multitasking skills. They say, we'll just adapt. This is the next stage.
And they're right. We will adapt. Our mental adaptability is arguably our defining characteristic throughout intellectual history. But as Carr stresses, adaptation itself is a neutral process. What truly matters isn't that we become different, but what we become.
Right. Adaptation isn't inherently good.
No. Martin Heidegger, the philosopher, warned decades ago that the overwhelming tide of technological revolution might lead to calculative thinking, efficient, means to an end thinking becoming the only way of thinking. And in the process, we could lose meditative thinking, the deeper contemplative kind, which he saw as the very essence of our humanity.
That's a heavy thought. And it raises that sobering concern Carr voices, that deep reading might become the province of a small and dwindling elite, something only a few pursue or are capable of.
Exactly. Richard Foreman, the playwright, used this powerful metaphor, fearing we're becoming pancake people, spread wide and thin as we connect with that vast network of information accessed by the mere touch of a button, but in the process, drained of our inner repertory of dense cultural inheritance. Wide but shallow.
And this inevitably impacts writing styles too, right? Pushing authors toward maybe a bland but immediately accessible style, just recording chatter, losing some virtuosity and experimentation because deep engagement is harder for readers.
Possibly. And the very impermanence of digital text, the ease of constant revision, might subtly reduce the pressure for perfection, for getting it exactly right the first time that printed works historically demanded. Why agonize over a sentence when you can tweak it endlessly later?
At the end of The Shallows, Carr shares his own personal attempt to kind of dismantle his online life for a few months. What happened?
He found it incredibly hard at first. His synapses howled for their net fix. He felt that physical craving for connection, for stimulation. But actually, he reported feeling calmer and more in control. His brain, he said, could breathe again.
But did it stick?
He admits to backsliding. He still enjoys and depends on many digital conveniences, like most of us do. It's an ongoing struggle, a tension many of us can probably relate to, knowing the potential downsides, but finding it hard to disconnect.
Yeah, definitely.
And this brings us right back to Carr's crucial, lingering questions. They aren't just for him, they're for all of us, for our children. How is the way we read changing? How is the way we write changing? How is the way we think changing? These aren't simple questions with easy answers. They're still unfolding as we continue to shape and be shaped by these incredibly powerful tools.
So let's leave our listeners with this. If our brains are, in fact, endlessly adaptable, constantly being reshaped by the tools we immerse ourselves in, what responsibility do we bear, individually and collectively, for consciously cultivating the cognitive skills we truly value? If the internet, used in a certain way, risks becoming a technology of forgetfulness, how do we ensure we don't just know where to find information, but that we can truly understand it, connect with it, and preserve that wealth of connections within our own minds that makes us thoughtful, creative, empathetic individuals? How can we be both connected and deep? That's a question not just for personal reflection, perhaps, but for society as a whole, as we keep navigating this ever-evolving intellectual landscape.